Darkness is the absence of light, and in the darkest night, a candle shines like a beacon. It is the contrast between the two that gives us the ability to define them. One of the most important distinctions we can make is between what we know and what we don't know, because our minds are fueled by the questions we ask, and we don't ask the question if we think that we already have the answer. My goal is to give you a new perspective, a new way to look at the world around us and the role we play in it. There are many rabbit holes for us to go down, so let's jump right in. Our current understanding of reality is built upon the foundations laid down for us by our ancestors. Our institutions of science and medicine stand on the backs of intellectual giants who came before us. We have progressed in our understanding of these foundational ideas throughout the ages, but we are far from having it all figured out. We have references to a third eye that date back to our earliest records, and the idea of a third eye emerged from a variety of cultures around the world. The similarities between their ideas are too vast to be explained by a coincidence. A more reasonable explanation is that there was a shared experience of inner sight that led them all to the same conclusion. Shared reality is one of the primary tests that we use to determine what's real and what is not. So it's a good idea to pay attention when multiple people from different times and cultures come to the same conclusion. Photoreceptors in the pineal gland give credence to this idea of inner sight, but the mechanism of sight consists of multiple functions and systems. The Eye of Horus is an Egyptian hieroglyph that is nearly an exact match to a sagittal cross-section of the human brain. When the two images are overlaid, the pupil of the Eye of Horus correlates to the thalamus. The thalamus is part of the brain that filters information coming from our sensory organs. It does this so our mind doesn't get overloaded with inconsequential information, like the feeling of your shoes on your feet. The awareness experiment from the previous video is an example of this filtering in action. The reason we don't see the person dancing across the screen is because the thalamus was filtering out the team wearing black jerseys. The gorilla suit is also black, so the thalamus ignored it along with the other players. I may not have seen the gorilla the first time I watched the video, but I couldn't miss it the second time. Changing the focus of our awareness, the lenses we look through, changes what our mind sees. Visible light waves are seen when they hit something they can't pass through, and when they are distorted by water vapor or a prism. It is possible that our eyes see a larger portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, but it would be a very different landscape, and with no frame of reference to interpret these images, our thalamus would ultimately filter it out. Could sightings of ghosts or aliens be examples of a person's filter being overridden by conscious awareness of visual glitches, like the things that we see in the corner of our eyes that seem to disappear when we look directly at them? The rods in our eyes detect motion and sense contrasts between black and white. Cones detect color, but they are focused in the area that correlates to what is directly in front of our eyes. The rods can see wavelengths that the cones can't. So we can see something move in our peripheral vision that will not register in the cones when we look directly at it. So the thalamus will write it off as an optical illusion. Remote viewing is a practice where someone views distant locations using their inner sight. They're given a sealed envelope or geological coordinates, so they know nothing about the target. They focus their inner awareness on what they are given, and describe what they experience through that lens. Remote viewing experiments done by the Stanford Research Institute in the early 70s caught the attention of the US government, and they brought the more talented participants into their own program. Both the US and Russia used psychic spies during the Cold War, and The Men Who Stare at Goats is a fictionalized version of these very real government programs. The most recent government program that we know of was ended and declassified in 1995, including the announcement that there was no real value ever gained from these programs. But this is standard practice when these kind of programs get rebooted under a different name. Ayahuasca is a plant medicine that is high in DMT, which is the chemical our pineal gland releases during REM sleep. Many who participate in this type of ceremony see the same landscape and the same beings, as if they were seeing an actual place rather than a random hallucination of the mind. The whole electromagnetic spectrum existed before we had the technology to detect it, and objects fell to Earth long before Newton came up with the concept of gravity. The concept of the third eye is based on lived experience. Whether the experience is caused by the pineal gland, the thalamus, or a combination of things is less important than the experience itself. Today we have a framework to understand what we experience when a lifted truck with a premium sound system drives by. But how would a person from 1,000 years ago experience the same event? How would they describe it? The objective experience is the same, but a person from 1,000 years ago would likely describe a chariot of the gods with a thundering sound that shook their body and the ground. We accept that energies and objects exist that we cannot directly see, but we also reject many ideas because we haven't been able to objectively measure them. Magic is just a term we use to label an event that we can't explain with our current understanding. Lighting a match may be a mundane event today, but it would be seen as wild magic to people that made fire by rubbing sticks together. My proposal is that we are much more than we currently believe, and, much like the full-grown elephant tied to the post, challenging an existing belief may produce some surprising results. I'm not asking you to believe in the third eye or some dimension of reality that we can possibly access. My request is that you consider the possibility and come to your own conclusions based on your own questions. To wrap this up, please consider the following. Horses are magnificent creatures with enormous strength. We have a working model that allows us to build a relationship with them that we can use to harness that strength. But a horse is quite dangerous to a person that doesn't know how to interact with them. The horse itself doesn't change, but no one will enjoy the experience of unwittingly approaching a horse from behind. Our minds are much more magnificent than a horse, but the outcome of our interactions with each are based on our level of understanding, for better or worse.